He sang about sunshine on his shoulders and country roads that always led him home, becoming one of the most beloved and seemingly wholesome entertainers in American music. The boy next door with round glasses and golden hair who made millions of people feel at peace just by listening to his voice. By 1974, he was firmly established as America's best-selling performer, and AllMusic has described him as among the most beloved entertainers of his era. But the man behind that gentle image carried a far more complicated and turbulent story than the public ever knew. One that begins with a name almost nobody remembers today. He was born Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. on December 31, 1943, in Roswell, New Mexico, the son of Irma Louise Swope and Captain Henry Dutch Deutschendorf C. Oster, a decorated United States Army Air Force pilot stationed at Roswell Army Airfield. This was no ordinary household. His father was a record-setting aviator who pushed a Convair B-58 Hustler bomber to historic airspeed records in 1961, and later, as a major in the Air Force, earned a place in the Air Force Hall of Fame. Greatness in the cockpit, however, didn't translate into warmth at home. In his 1994 autobiography, Take Me Home, Denver described his father as a stern man who could not show love for his children. And because military life meant the family moved constantly, young Henry struggled to make friends and assimilate with children his own age, often feeling out of place and unsure where he truly belonged. He grew up bouncing between places including Arizona, Alabama, and Texas, a childhood of constant upheaval that planted the seeds of the introspective songwriting he'd later become famous for. Everything shifted with one small gift. At age 11, his grandmother gave him an acoustic guitar, and for a boy who had spent his whole life feeling invisible in one new town after another, it became the one thing that was entirely his own. He learned to play well enough to perform at local clubs by the time he reached college, where he attended Texas Tech University in Lubbock, sang in a folk group called the Alpine Trio, and studied architecture while also joining the Delta Tau Delta fraternity. But the pull of music was stronger than any classroom. Denver dropped out of Texas Tech in 1963 and moved to Los Angeles, where he began singing in folk clubs, chasing a dream that, at the time, seemed almost impossible. It was in those gritty LA folk clubs that his identity was erased forever. While performing at a club called Leadbirders, owner Randy Sparks commented that Henry's name simply wouldn't fit on a marquee. Sparks suggested he take the last name Denver instead, inspired by a song Sparks had written and recorded under that title. What most people don't realize is that this wasn't an easy decision for him. John resisted at first, adamantly wanting to keep the family name he'd carried his entire life, but he eventually, reluctantly, gave in. He ultimately chose to keep the surname tied to the capital of Colorado, his favorite state. And just like that, Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. quietly disappeared from public view. John Denver was born a new name, a new face, a brand the entire world would soon fall in love with. But underneath that stage name, the real man and his real struggles were only just beginning. In 1965, Denver joined the Chad Mitchell Trio, replacing founder Chad Mitchell. And after several personnel changes, the group became known as Denver, Boise, and Johnson. By 1969, he had left the trio behind to pursue a solo career, releasing his first album, Rhymes and Reasons, for RCA Records. His real breakthrough, though, came when another act made one of his songs famous. Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. rose to fame after a song he had written, Leaving on a Jet Plane, was recorded by the trio Peter, Paul and Mary in 1968. From there, his career exploded into one of the most successful in American music history. He recorded approximately 300 songs, around 200 of which he wrote himself, releasing 33 albums and singles that were certified gold and platinum, with estimated total sales of more than 33 million copies. Yet behind the soaring success, the public thought of total peace and simplicity masked something far messier. If you've ever attended a wedding, there's a good chance you've heard Annie's song, one of the most tender and romantic love songs ever recorded. The kind couples have danced to for decades, believing it proved that true love existed. But here's a twist almost nobody talks about. Annie's song was written for his first wife, Annie Martell, and that marriage ended in divorce in 1982. He tried love again, as Denver later married Cassandra Delaney, an Australian actress, but that marriage also ended in divorce. Two marriages, both collapsing, all while the public still pictured him as the gentle romantic strumming peacefully on a mountainside. So what was really happening behind closed doors? Despite his squeaky clean image, Denver's personal life was turbulent, and he struggled with the immense pressures of fame. There was something even darker simmering beneath the surface, too. He faced legal troubles, including arrests for drunk driving, which he later admitted were part of a larger, lifelong battle with substance abuse. Those close to him have said he battled both alcoholism and depression, particularly throughout the 1980s, struggles that strained his relationships and his career alike. He was arrested twice more for drunk driving in the 1990s, incidents that drew real public scrutiny and slowly cracked the perfect, wholesome image fans had spent decades building around him. Think about that for a moment. The man who told the entire world to slow down, breathe deeply, and find peace in nature was, in his own private life, fighting a war he couldn't seem to win. His outspokenness didn't stop at his personal struggles. Denver's vocal views on environmental and social issues sometimes alienated more conservative audiences. And in the 1980s, he faced criticism for his anti-hunting stance and for performing in the Soviet Union in both 1985 and 1987. Controversial moves during the Cold War. He also caused a minor diplomatic stir when he refused to perform in South Africa during apartheid, a principled stand that limited his international touring opportunities. On the humanitarian side, Denver co-founded the Hunger Project in 1977 alongside Werner Erhard and Robert W. Fuller, and he was later appointed by President Jimmy Carter to serve on the President's Commission on World Hunger, even writing the song "I Want to Live" as its official theme. In 1979, he performed Rhymes and Reasons at the Music for UNICEF concert, with royalties from the performance donated directly to the organization. By the late 1980s, though, the hits weren't coming the way they once had. Musical tastes were shifting, and the soft folk sound that had made him America's best-selling artist a decade earlier was suddenly falling out of style. His career began to decline as those trends shifted. But Denver refused to disappear quietly, remaining active in both music and activism, continuing to perform, release albums, and speak out on environmental issues. Behind the scenes, though, the empire he'd built financially, professionally, and personally was beginning to wobble, even as the public still pictured the smiling, sunny man from the album covers. What few fans realized was that this gentle folk singer, famous for songs about mountains, meadows, and simple living, secretly dreamed of something far bigger than Earth itself. Denver continued recording into the 1990s while also focusing heavily on environmental issues, lending vocal support to space exploration, and even testifying before Congress to protest censorship in music. In one such testimony before the Senate in 1985, he passionately argued against censorship of any kind, recounting how his own song Rocky Mountain High had been banned from radio stations for being mistakenly labeled as drug-related, when in reality it described the awe he felt witnessing a meteor shower in the mountains. His fascination with flight and the sky wasn't just professional advocacy, though it was deeply personal. His own father taught him to fly in the mid-1970s, a moment that finally helped repair their long-strained relationship, and in 1980, father and son even co-hosted an award-winning television special together titled The Higher We Fly, The History of Flight, which won the Osborne Award from the Aviation or Space Writers Association and was honored at the Houston Film Festival. For John Denver, flying wasn't just a hobby. It was the one place he had truly connected with the father who could never say "I love you." Tragically, it would also become the place where his story ended. October 12, 1997, Monterey Bay, California. Denver, an experienced and passionate pilot who owned several aircraft, was killed at age 53 in a single fatality crash while piloting a recently purchased light plane. What investigators discovered afterward was almost too cruel to be true. A post-accident investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board found that the leading cause of the crash was Denver's inability to switch fuel tanks during flight. The fuel had been depleted during the flight to Monterey, and several brief practice takeoffs and landings he'd performed at the airport just before his final flight. And his newly purchased amateur-built Rutan aircraft had an unusual fuel tank selector valve configuration. The valve had originally been designed to sit between the pilot's legs for easy access, but the builder had instead placed it behind the pilot's left shoulder, with the fuel gauge also positioned behind the seat and completely invisible to the person at the controls.